Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Maggie, and I share my life experience with you in hopes of making a difference in your life. In my previous video, I discussed my life experience with being an Asian American. I especially highlighted how my acceptance into the college I went to wasn't quite what my parents had hoped for, and how that impacted me mentally. I reminded you that the dreams that others have for you isn't something that you necessarily have to force yourself to achieve. Today, I will be talking about finding the right motivation. I have personally found it really difficult to achieve goals until I have found the right motivation myself. It's always been extremely difficult for me to achieve or complete something unless I have a strong desire to do it myself. If the reason for me to complete something is purely because somebody I know wants me to do it, I dread the task and eventually burn out. I have a few examples on what I mean on that topic. The first one I want to talk about is my education. As I had mentioned before, I brought shame to my family when I didn't get into the colleges that my parents had hoped that I would get into. Well, I actually brought more shame to them when I actually dropped out of that college a few years later. When I first went to college, I went in as a computer engineering major. Honestly, at that point, I didn't even really know what I was signing up for. I just decided to choose a major that sounded kind of cool, and I was like, okay, cool, engineering. I know they make a decent amount of money, and I totally thought that computer engineering is you go in and you work with hardware, and then you basically fix computers. And it turns out it is nothing like that. I ended up taking a coding class for computer engineering, and I absolutely was like, yeah, this is not at all what I signed up for. I'm not interested in this at all. So shortly after, I decided to change my major. While I was trying to figure out what I should change to, I finally decided to go with accounting. And I decided to go with accounting because I figured it was pretty easy, because it's definitely an area that every company always needs. And I figured that if I just take this route, then I'm always going to have a job security. So essentially, I chose to go that route for the purpose of job security. But really, as I was taking the classes, I kind of realized that I really don't have that much of an interest in accounting either. So eventually I dropped out of college because at that time, my priority was just not school, nor did I really see a value in education. So when I dropped out of college, naturally my parents did not love the idea, but they had no choice but to really kind of accept it. And surprisingly, they were actually extremely supportive and told me that, you know what, if you want to go to college, fine, but I want you to start looking for a career job now. And at that time, I still, didn't understand the appeal of a degree, because I was like, okay, well, somebody like Bill Gates, he's able to accomplish so much and be so successful in his life without having a degree. What is the purpose of me having one? Honestly, at the time, I really had no business comparing myself to Bill Gates, because my ambition is nowhere close to that of Bill Gates. So after dropping out, I started working at a small accounting firm, being an assistant, and it didn't go very far before I realized that I actually needed a degree to be able to get a little bit farther in life. Or I could obviously continue to work without a degree, as many people do today, but where I wanted to be, I knew that I actually needed to have a degree in order to be able to go further. And I think I was even looking at different jobs to apply for, and everything basically requires a degree, and I was like, oh crap, I think it's time to go back to school. So basically, shortly after that, I decided to go back to school. And honestly, the first time I went to school and the second time I went back to school is honestly such a quite different experience, because the first time it just felt like such an obligation, and I was just I was dreading it, because I felt like I needed to do it, because it was something that I've always been taught to do. Part of life is you go to school, you go to college, and then you graduate and you get a good job. And it's those are just the steps of life that you have to follow. It was not something that I really enjoyed following. But then the second time, I had a lot more motivation. It wasn't so much that it was an obligation part of life. It was me fully understanding that me trying to get a job, and me seeing all of the job descriptions out there and all the job requirements out there, that a minimum is to have a bachelor's degree. So I was okay, well, I definitely need to have that if I want to go a little bit farther in life. And the other factor that actually really motivated me to actually get a degree is knowing how embarrassed my family was of the fact that I dropped out of college. And it was like, and the reason I dropped out of college was like so lame. It wasn't even like because I was pursuing like a good opportunity or anything. It was just because I dropped out because my focus wasn't there, because my priorities weren't there, and I just didn't care essentially. So one of the things I want to say that actually motivates me a lot is like essentially my family. Like me wanting to do so much for my family is actually one of the reasons that continuously pushes me in several ways. And me like finishing my degree in the first place, a lot of it has to do with my family, essentially knowing that my family would be proud if I actually did that. Now, the second thing I want to talk about in terms of motivation is money. That this is something that I'm pretty sure a lot of us can all relate to. So in reality, I think everybody probably will not complain if they can make more money. But even though money is something that everybody like desires, I don't feel like everybody has the ambition to want to go and make more money. Based on my experience, unless you have a specific reason as to why you want to go make that money in the first place, a lot of times it's actually really hard to find the motivation to go and take action on that. So an example that I have in regards to that is back in 2018, I decided to move out of LA to this small town to make my relationship work. So I was moving from a situation where in Los Angeles, I had less financial responsibilities and I had a higher paying job. And I was moving to a small town where I was going to have higher financial responsibilities, like paying for a mortgage, and I actually started being like completely independent on my own, and while taking a pay cut. And at the time, my mom was like constantly concerned about me, and she would reach out and be like, look, do you need any help with like, you know, paying with your mortgage, and can I just please assist you, because I know that you have a habit of just wanting to spend money and be reckless and just like buy whatever it is that you want. And I you know, as much as I appreciate the fact that my mom is constantly offering these things, I was actually, you know, telling her, I was like, you know what, I really do appreciate the fact that you're trying to like do this for me, but I do feel like I need to do this on my own, because at the end of the day, like the fact that I'm making less money and the fact that I really want the things that I want, like it's actually going to push me to want to work harder. And if I just have everything handed to me all the time, then I'm just going to be too comfortable to just be okay and then just coast essentially. And quite honestly, what happened was not what I expected to happen, because eventually I actually got really comfortable, and I essentially just, you know, kind of stayed in the same place for a while, and I didn't really care too much about making more money, because I was in a situation where I was able to pay for my mortgage, and I was able to have like a comfortable like living situation that I was definitely okay with. So, you know, I didn't feel like I needed more money to be able to survive. It wasn't until a few years later when my boyfriend were discussing about moving out of that town, because we felt like, you know, we've seen enough of this town, and then the lack of amenities was starting to get to us. So we were discussing about moving somewhere else that was, you know, more compatible with our lifestyles. So we ultimately decided that we're going to move back to Los Angeles. And naturally, everybody associates Los Angeles with being extremely expensive. So one of the things that we had to do was save up in order to be able to make the move. So after we had already made the decision to move to Los Angeles eventually, that's when I started to work extremely hard, because now I have a goal. Now I have a goal in mind that like, look, what my goal in mind and what I'm going to do with this money. So basically I started like opening an Etsy store, and started thinking about some crafting stuff that I can do to sell, and I started like delivering food for Uber Eats and everything. And eventually we basically worked really hard to like save up a little bit more quickly in order to move sooner. And also in the last couple of years, I really noticed my parents aging. My parents are now like in their 60s, and like one of them is actually pushing 70. And so with seeing my parents age so much, like year over year, you know, as your parents get older, I'm sure a lot of you can experience like, you know, can understand this as well. You start to see the significant aging of your parents like year after year, and so it's very heartbreaking for me to like see my parents getting older and still working so hard. Seeing my parents age has only really made me realize that I need to work even harder, and I need to be making more money so I can have the ability to make my parents' lives like more comfortable, because as they get older, I feel like they've already provided everything that they have our entire lives, and now it's my turn to give back to them. And the only way that I can give back to them for myself to live both comfortably and also provide my parents like the things I want to give them, the only way that I can do this is by making more money. And so naturally, in the last like year or two, I've really been thinking about like how I can make some more sustainable, like different revenue streams that will allow me to have more revenue than what I make at a job. This is definitely a concept that I would not have understood like 10 years ago, because when my parents were still younger and I had less financial responsibilities and, you know, my parents' lack of aging to worry about, I would have not even thought about trying to make more money, because I'm pretty much just like, well, what is the concept of trying to make more money and having this responsibility, having to make more money when I don't have to? But now that I feel like I'm like burdening myself with all the things I want to achieve and actually do, I'm like a lot more motivated to actually go out there and like think of these creative ways to make money and stuff like that. With all of that said, I believe people need to find the right motivation to achieve their goals. Some people's motivation may just be that they're extremely competitive purely because they want to be the best at something. And some people's motivation is just like they just want to do things because they're extremely passionate about it. And some people's motivation could be that they just want to make people happy. But I just want to let everybody know that at the end of the day, we should always find a motivation for the goals we want to achieve so you don't burn out from it. As always, I hope this video is helpful and there's some kind of takeaway for you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. Until next time.